I don't know.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. How you doing?
All right.
Through this chapter tonight. I want to reread a paragraph that we finished off last time because it's part of a series of paragraphs that fill in the whole picture. It's on the bottom of page 40. It's talking about the lowest, or the most basic aspect of the soul and its function and what it does. Right now, what he's doing right now, just to get you to contextualize what he's describing right now, are what's described in the Kabbalah, the 5 levels of the soul. Okay, which obviously the first 4, like he's explaining here, correspond to the first 4 worlds that we described in the previous chapters. Okay, and the 5th one, we'll get to it. But by the way, it's very interesting that the way it's explained, according to, you can even say in the Gemara and the Talmud, it's not so far-fetched. You don't have to go to great mystical books to see this parallel, but this concept of like it's alluded to in the Talmud, let's put it that way. This concept of the ascension of our souls, or where we're going, especially in Yom Kippur. Okay, with each prayer. I think I mentioned this last time, maybe I've touched upon it, but if not, then it's good. If yes, then okay, I'm repeating myself, but I'm going to repeat this whole paragraph anyway. But the concept of like every tefillah, every prayer on Yom Kippur is another ascension in our own self, that corresponds to going up the worlds until you reach the highest point, which is Nilam. How many prayers are there? There are 5 prayers, right? 5 different prayers. There's the Ma'ariv prayer, which is Arvit, which is the nighttime. Shachrit, 2, Musaf, right? And Mincha and Ne'ilah. By the way, the Mishnah describes that should be done on every fast day, but that's a whole other issue, why we don't. Importantly, like major fast days when we need to say Ne'ilah. But the fifth level is the highest of the high, which is not even in the worlds. And he'll get to it right now, and let's just see it. And just it's something to put into another layer, another level of contextualization, that you can, another touch point that could be something that you can refer to in your own mind when you get up to Yom Kippur and start understanding what's going on there, especially when you're in Yom Kippur and understanding what's going on there, and not just worrying about why you're not eating and stuff like that. Okay, so let's read this chapter. Let's read these 1, 2, 3. He puts it all in three paragraphs. We're going to do it pretty quickly.
On the bottom, what, page 40?
Page 40 in this edition of his book. Okay, so he says, in other words, a human soul at its most primary level animates existence in terms of life force, movement, and propagation of the species. And then on another level, it acts as the source of man's capacity to think, to imagine, to dream, to contemplate. That's what the soul is doing. Okay, that's the most basic, what we call, what the Kabbalah will call the nefesh. The nefesh. Okay, that's the nefesh part of the soul. Now you ask, why is every soul called a nefesh and also there's a particular aspect of the soul that's called nefesh. In fact, Rabbi Steinsaltz addresses that issue in another book, and he says it's the same way that when we make a bracha, a blessing on the four species during Sukkot, we say al metilat lulav, right? The taking of the lulav. But we're not just taking the lulav. There's the hadassim, there's the etrog, there's everything, right? But the lulav in that context of that bracha, of that blessing, is talking about all four species. And one detail of those four species is also the particular lulav. So we're using the word as a general, encompassing everything. And also there is a particular part of that general that is particularly that name, that thing that we're talking about. So same thing with the nefesh.
So
the nefesh and
nefesh, not ruach.
Ruach is next.
It's interesting because what he's describing here is when we talk about spirituality.
Yeah.
His definition.
Yeah.
Right. Just a thing to imagine, to dream.
Right. Anything spiritual. Right.
And
right. It gives it's this source of life. Remember I said at the beginning when my father told that story of the professor brought out the first day of medical school. When he brought what's the difference between a live body and a dead body? This is what the nefesh does. Nefesh makes this body into a live thing. It animates it, exactly. Let's go just read this quickly. The divine, I'm continuing with the text. The divine spark that is the soul that vitalizes the human body with the essence of the life of living creatures, but in a manner far more complex and potent than in other forms of life. Now he's just making what's the difference between a nefesh of a human being and a nefesh of everything else. It's like the Arizal writes in his writings, everything has a nefesh. Everything is getting life force. Is becoming, even an inanimate object. But there's a unique type of nefesh of a human. And that is different than other nefashot in the world, other types of souls. In spite of this added complexity of mind and emotion, this level of a soul is called the animal soul, in the sense that it is parallel to the souls of other living creatures and functions, thinks and is aware of itself as being concentrated in a particular vessel, the vessel of the body. It animates the body. That's what it belongs to. At the same time as we have seen, this soul, the primary natural animal soul of man, is not necessarily connected only with animal needs or with physical aspects of life, being as it is the source of those aspects or qualities peculiar to one as a person. So it's animating everything. What my wife just said is anything spiritual. It can be the loftiest parts of spirituality, but it's the spiritual part of yourself that still belongs to the animal world. Okay, that is the animal soul. That's the lowest part of your soul. Then he goes on. This is where we ended up last week.
One's intellect.
Yes.
Even Rabbi Steinsaltz is intellect.
Yes.
It's part of his animal soul.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's not what defines that. The soul is not defined by something that's anything spiritual. I'm sorry. It's not defined by anything that's good or bad. It's anything that is spiritual. The most base spiritual things, right? Or the highest and loftiest spiritual things.
This is so interesting, though. This is the lowest level of our soul, or the most primary level of our soul. Yeah. But this is the actual vehicle by which we, as Jews, we celebrate and seek.
He's gonna touch upon that a little bit later, which I really want to get to.
Welcome. We're on in the cream colored edition with the rose petals on it. We're on page 41.
Okay. At a higher level, okay, above this primal soul, and it's really interesting, by the way. I really strongly encourage everybody to, next time you take a machzor and prepare yourself before Yom Kippur, which is something that it says in the Shulchan Aruch in the law, in the Jewish code of Jewish law, that one must do, by the way, prepare yourself before. I don't do it so much, so don't worry about it. I mean, the thing that it's something that needs to be done. It's really interesting to start looking at the piyutim and the different liturgy and the different types of prayers that we say, and the differences between the nighttime prayer, the Shachrit prayer, the Musaf prayer, Mincha, and the Eilah, and then try to touch upon, oh, wait a second, I know this. So this is supposed to be corresponding to this in this world, and this in this part of my soul. Is the language a little bit different? Is what it's talking about just a little bit different, in a different aspect? Really, really cool to start seeing those types of things. Okay, because now we're getting a higher level, and if it corresponds to Shachrit of Yom Kippur, then you can make a parallel of it. You can make a connection. At a higher level, above this primal soul, that was the word you used, and it's good. There exists in every human being a divine soul. This is the first spark of consciousness beyond that of zoological species, beyond even the consciousness of a higher or more developed animal, which we are in a certain sense, and is directly connected to divine essence. This connection of the divine soul in the form of a line drawn from above, we read this also last week, I'm sorry. This connection of divine soul in the form of a line drawn above extends from the primal level called soul, which exists in one form or another in every Jew. He's using this word soul in Hebrew. This what would be called ruach, okay? The spirit. It exists in each and every individual being, hidden and veiled as a spark of higher perception of a superior aspiration, and touches the higher level, which is spirit. That is what is the divine soul doing to you, okay? It means that in you exists innately, without you doing any work at all, there's a certain level that is there, right, and can be touched upon, and can be accessed, that gives you superior aspirations, okay, than just me, I. Even the I and the loftiest levels, but it's still I. There's a superior aspiration of something that's beyond me, okay? And touches, exactly what he says here, touches the higher level with the spirit. This level corresponds to the higher world above our known world of action called the world of formation. Remember, we read that. We talked about that. In other words, that level of the soul of man, known as spirit or ruach, corresponds in its inner essence to the level of an angel in the world of formation. So you're functioning in that world when you touch upon or you access that, or you're working at a conscious level in that level of your own soul. Again, these paragraphs, I want to just get the gist of it and not go into the nitty-gritty details, because I don't know it so much. I mean, I know it, but you have to experience it, and you have to contemplate, and you have to think about it, every person to themselves. Beyond this, there is a third level called neshama. So we have nefesh, ruach, neshama. Okay? Neshama, higher soul. Okay? Which corresponds to the level of being in the world of creation, which is still higher and more pure. So the neshama part of our soul is going to correspond to what we read before, the more intellectual part, or the understanding or the comprehension. Now he goes very quickly above this. He doesn't even dwell upon this so much. Rabbi Steinsaltz. Above this, above the level of neshama, there's a level called chaya. Now we got the mincha of Yom Kippur, okay, which corresponds to the action of the forces of the sfirot in the world of emanation. You're already up to a point where we've said already in these previous chapters talking about the worlds. We're already to a point where the world of emanation, like he said, remember if you remember, he said world of emanation is not really even a world anymore. Okay, it's just barely a world, just because it has some kind of sense of self, or there is some kind of sense of self in that world. But it's really emanation as it means. It's just an emanation of God. There's barely any hiddenness there already. Okay, and beyond all these, the most inward point of the divine spark is the one called Yechida, which may be considered the point of contact between the soul and the very essence of the divine. And that's what you reach in a conscious level, or you're supposed to, or this is the whole purpose of reaching that during the Elah, the highest of the high, okay? Which is almost like an exploration, complete exploration of the self, complete exploration and complete nullification of one's individuality completely. By the way, I'm just going to say very quick something to think about. That is why in every congregation across the world, Jewish congregation, at the end of Yom Kippur, everyone, Sephardi, everybody says Shema at the end, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Because that's the ultimate declaration of nullification and exploration of your own self. Because you're pronouncing that everything is just one with God, and there's nothing indivisible from Him, including myself. There's no separation whatsoever at all. Okay? But that exists. That, like he said, it's all one soul. It's all one single entity. It's just a question of where you're consciously existing. Okay? Okay. So we're going to skip now a couple of paragraphs, just to get, because these parts are get a little bit for myself to be able to get into. It's pretty deep. You could read it on your own, but we're going to go and skip to all the way to 46, page 46. We're going to skip the parts that he's talking about. Again, how can I put it this? I'll put it in a pretty straightforward and blunt way. These next paragraphs are really like the plumbing of the soul. Okay, what they're made up of, how they interact, how each pipe interacts with the other, where each nut and bolt goes, how does it function. Those are things you can delve in and go into, and they're important things to understand, but we're not going to get into it right now because it'll take too long and it's too detailed for our purposes and too technical for our purposes at this point. So let's skip to page 46. The paragraph that starts the soul of man, okay, which my wife alluded to before. Now he's going to talk about this. That ironically, the part of the soul which we live on a conscious level is the lowest part, but it has the most impact. Okay.
But I would say it sounds like the lowest part of our soul is the point, in a certain sense, where we connect with the divine.
In the most.
The most.
Yes.
If we learn Torah with our minds and we make God literally part of our.
So let's read it. Exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly. You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So page 46. Are you there, everybody? Okay. The soul of man functions through its instrument or vessel, which is the body. Okay. Through it and with it, the soul thinks, perceives, feels, and acts. Through it and by it, the soul has to fulfill its double function in reality. Okay. Only through it. First, it has to perform a certain task in the process of perfecting the outer world, or at least that part of the world to which it is destined. That's the first task of the soul, coming down and performing through the world. It was put in a certain place at a certain time, in a certain rate, and there's a certain portion of the world that it has to perfect. And second, its task is to raise itself. Because what's the whole purpose of coming down here if not to raise itself? Right? To heights that it can never imagine, like he said before, and we read in last week, right? But these tasks are not necessarily separate. They're accomplished simultaneously. Now, pay attention here. For the physical world contains, it's exactly what my wife was alluding to, but he's going to get more detailed in it. For this physical world contains in itself a higher essence, higher forces, in which, even though hidden and distorted, there exists elements of the original divine formlessness. I love that. I love the combination of those two words. Divine formlessness. Okay? Not the divine form, but the divine formlessness.
Original divine formlessness.
Right. The original divine formlessness.
I agree.
Here is the irony of ironies that Hasidus comes to explain and Kabbalah comes to explain is that, and Jack Nicholson explains in A Few Good Men, okay, which my wife doesn't like. I love that movie and that play, okay? You can't handle the truth, meaning you can't deal with the truth if you have any comprehension about it. So the only way to deal with it and to function with it is if you have no comprehension about it. Okay? Because the minute you comprehend it, you'll expire. You'll burn up. You won't be able, you can't handle it.
Literally mind blown.
Yes. Mind and emotion and whatever you want. So Dafka, exactly like my wife said, the lower part of the soul is the one that can interact with the original divine formlessness. These higher parts that are hidden and distorted within this world. Okay, and that is its goal. Okay, let's go on. I'm reading the continuation text. It is these higher forces that the soul, in its work of tikkun or correction, is united. The soul is united with these higher forces that are in this world that can't really exist in other worlds. Okay? Because there's too much transparency. There's not enough hidden.
So is the nefesh is a buffer for us?
Is the nefesh a buffer? No, the hiddenness is a buffer. The nefesh is the part that can function within the body so that it can interact with this original divine formlessness. It's not that the nefesh is the buffer, but rather the fact that it's hidden is a buffer already.
But in other words, we can't, I don't know who we is actually, but we can't interact with the higher levels of the soul. So we need the nefesh to interact with it for us, like electricity.
Very good, very good, very good. This is in a nutshell. You are describing what Chazal say, what the rabbis say in the Talmud is Chacham Adif Min Abi. Okay, a person who understands and comprehends with a soul within a body is preferable to a prophet. Because the prophet, we skipped one of the paragraphs, I'm sorry, we skipped it, but one of the paragraphs it describes is who is the type of person that very rarely, in a conscious way, is able to interact on those higher levels of its own soul. That's called a prophet. But in a certain sense, a prophet, because it is perceiving certain things, cannot translate it and cannot interact with it correctly because it understands too much or it's perceiving too much. A chacham who learns about God within this world, call it with its animals, with his or her animal soul that is functioning within this world over here and is staying on that level, is able to interact with this formless, this original divine formless part because it's able to translate it and process it through the body, through the soul. So you may say that it's the whole process is a buffer, not just the animal soul, not just that part of the soul. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
The animal soul might be analogized to, like the radio that transmits the waves into something comprehensible, or some kind of computer analogy that I don't know about, an operating system or something.
No. The Torah, he says it over here. The Torah is the radio waves. The Torah is the transmitter even of the radio waves. But if you would comprehend the Torah on its level that it's at, in a conscious level, in the higher worlds, right? There's too much transparency. It wouldn't be graspable.
It would be like if you were to print out computer code, it would just be like zeros and ones.
Right.
And but for some reason I'm trying to think of it like what is it in like medicines? Very often the actual compound that heals you.
It's very, very poisonous. Rabbi Steinmetz brings that in his Beer Tanya also.
No, I wasn't going to say that yet. That's like the whole homeopathy analogy that like Manis Friedman brings and all that. But I'm saying, like when you take a capsule, there's a lot of starch that they have to fill the capsule with, and in order is like the vehicle in order for the actual compound.
He gives the original. Let's go read a couple more lines because he actually gives the original.
That's a question I don't need to answer now, but I'm thinking, so what good are all the other parts of our soul if we really don't seem to have any access to them, and they don't really seem to do any of the work?
So
why have them? What are they doing?
They give you glimpses of what can be.
So it's like we get little bits of the flash of chachma every once in a while.
Correct. Exactly.
And then it settles down, comes down into this world, like
yes.
And it okay, fine.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And that's what a prophet is trying to do.
Okay.
Because what's a prophet trying to do? He's trying to show you. He's trying to show you glimpses, but understanding that not everybody can live on that level. Although, which is very interesting, and this is one of the tensions that we just had in one of the previous. We can go on and on about this. This is one of the tensions between Yitro and Moshe. Okay, because Moshe, and he's going to say it later, Moshe again. I wish everybody would be prophets. And Yitro was the one saying, you can't have that. Who's right? Who's correct? So Rabbi Steinsaltz, in a beautiful essay on the Torah portion of Yitro, in talks on the Parsha, right, explains that both of them are correct. It's not as if Yitro told Moshe something he didn't know. They're both correct. You need the aspiration. You need this leader that says, I wish everybody would be able to see what I'm seeing. And then at the same time, you need the Yitro to say, whoa, 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 whoa. But they're not. So therefore, now what do we do?
Right.
So you need to have a Torah. Rabbi Shlomo explains it in Birta. He explains it as, oh no, we explained it. No, where did he? I can't remember explaining. But anyway, he explained it. It's like a computer. We explained it before. It's like a computer, right? Bottom line, the person who's doing the functioning, who wants to create change in the world, all you really have to teach that person is which button to push. How do you make a space? Here's the space button. Okay. The prophet knows all the computer codes behind the space button, how it makes a space. Now, does everybody need to know that? Now, this, by the way, this is one of the reasons. What is one of the reasons of the opposition of learning this type of stuff? This is one of the reasons why some of the rabbis, and a lot of the majority of the rabbis in the previous generation, says we shouldn't be teaching it and we shouldn't be learning it. Why do you need to know this? Right? Why do you need to know this? You just need to know which button to push, what to do on Purim, what to do on Pesach, how to daven, what to say, when to stand, when to sit, which wine to use, what's chametz, what's matzah. Just why do I have to understand the deep ideas of chametz, the deep ideas? That's what you're asking, right? Why do I have to understand what am I changing? Because, and the Hasidic answer is because we can't function anymore that way. You can't just tell people push this button. They need to understand. They want to understand. Okay? And they won't do things if they don't understand or get a glimpse of what it means or something about that. So we can go on and on about that. That's a whole other conversation as well. Let's go on over here because I really wanted. Okay. I'm sorry I'm skipping a little. There's a lot to discuss here, but it's a lot of food for thought as well. Okay. Is united. And in thus raising a portion of the world, it is also raised and uplifted. That's what he says simultaneously it's happening. The relation between body and soul, and altogether between the spirit of things and their corporeality, may be expressed by the example, and this is the classic example. This is a mamish example. This example given in Kabbalah of a rider on a horseback. That's how I want to get that. A rider who is in control and guides his steed go much farther than he can go on foot. How aptly then does the image of the Messiah as a poor man riding on a donkey describe the human predicament, the divine spark born and guiding, the physical donkey bearing up and waiting for guidance and power. So it's not, that's why I said to Shana, it's not exactly a buffer. It's not exactly a buffer. The situation is a buffer. But what's happening here is that the animal soul, or the soul, okay, is supposed to guide towards higher things, and the world that it interacts with is just waiting for it to be guided. Tell me where to go. The horse, the donkey, where to go. But it needs a rider. It needs a guide. Okay? Okay, something to think about. Okay.
No, I just realized that the idea when I said, so what good are those higher levels if we really want to ask them, is that before it said, or last week we talked about, that a person's soul is made up of a whole unique combination of spheros.
Right, yes.
Right. So really, in a certain sense, just like those are the pipelines, the channels through which, things filter into this world, well, the same thing goes with our soul.
Well, we skipped the paragraph that he said. That's the first paragraph that we skipped. Yes. No, I'm sorry, not the first. The third paragraph that he says. Yes, he says okay, exactly fine. That.
I wonder, Esther, if there is an analogy. I could be wrong, but it might not work, but actually with your body. Your body can function at a very high level or a very low level. There's a lot of things that make it function at an extremely high level. So you could say, why do I need all those things? I just need to eat, poop, sleep, right?
Right.
But your body can function at an extremely high level, and you benefit from that. It's a much more enriching existence, right?
Right.
So in a way, it might be comparable to the soul that it can function at a very basic level, or it can function at an extremely sophisticated level, and you don't even know it.
Well, there's also a very good, Shoshana, thank you. But I'd like to say what the first Chabad, what we call the Alter Rebbe, one of his main ideas of I'll go a little bit deeper and more detailed regarding why do we need to know this, or why do we need those things in the first place. First of all, it's a pasuk in the Torah, which this concept explains. Therefore, ki karov elecha hadavar ma'od, because this thing is very close to you in your mouth and your heart to do. And what we're explaining here is because it's a part of you, even those highest levels, it means you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's there. It's just a question of you tapping into it or not. So they are there, those higher levels of consciousness, the higher levels of being. It's there, it's innate, and it's just a question, can you dig deep enough to tap into your own self? You don't have to look anywhere else for it. It's there inside of you. And then the other thing to explain is, and this the Alter Rebbe uses this as a proof, but it's also a proof, but it's also therefore an responsibility, because that's the basic of this whole book called the Tanya, which is that in high pressure situations, when push comes to shove, when it's a question, a decision of are you for, are you against? Okay, are you going to be separated from God, or are you going to be connected to God? You're going to automatically, even without you being able to explain for yourself, this is what the Alter Rebbe explains, you're going to make a decision to not be separated from God. It usually ends up with death. Okay, that's what we call Mesirut Nefesh, giving over your soul, dying in Kiddush Hashem. Even people who couldn't even explain it, why they're doing it. It's inexplicable. It's because that higher part of the soul gets revealed in a way that you can explain, but it's a part of you just couldn't, at a certain level, you couldn't sever the connection. And it was a part of you. This trick that the Tanya is trying to describe, and based on all of this, right, is how to live with drawing from that energy and not exploding and dying from it, or because of it, or not only allowing it for it to be revealed in times of such drama and such explosion. Okay, so the two things go together. It's very important to find out. And why does the Torah have to tell you that it's very close to you? Why is the Torah telling it to you? Why is Moshe Rabbeinu telling that to us at the end of Deuteronomy? What's the point? The point is because he needs you to know. I'm not telling you something that's not part of you. It's a part of you. You may not even know it. It's unconscious, but there is part of you, and it gets expressed in the world in certain situations. So therefore, now what do you do with that? Can you tap into that energy in your regular day-to-day life? That's the question. Okay? Let's go on and finish up this chapter, hopefully. The path of tikkun, the course plotted for the soul's sojourn in the world, is generally found in the Torah, which is supposed to be a guiding instrument. For the Torah is not only a higher revelation, it is a practical guide to direct man on the way, showing him what to do and how to do it in his task of repairing the world. Okay? What is considered repairing, what's considered ruining, and it's a map. Within this general course or task of raising the level of the universe, each and every soul has to find its own particular way, its own place, and the specific objects relating to its existence. Therefore, it has been said that each of the letters of the Torah has some corresponding soul. That is to say, every soul is a letter in the entire Torah and its own part to play. The soul that has fulfilled its task, that has done what it has to do in terms of creating or repairing its own part of the world and realizing its own essence, remember that, keep on going back, that it's part of you, can wait after death for the perfection of the world as a whole. It relaxes and waits till everybody catches up, type of thing. But not all the souls are so privileged. Many stray for one reason or another. Sometimes a person does not do all the proper things, and sometimes he misuses force and spoils his portion and the portion of others. Remember we talked about the birds pecking at those divine pipes, right? In such cases, the soul does not complete its task and may even itself be damaged by contact with the world. It has not managed to complete that portion of reality which only this particular soul can complete. And therefore, remember I started this whole chapter with that story about my dorm counselor, Moshe Cohen, when he was asked at his Shabbos table by somebody saying, what is reincarnation of the soul? And he said, before you ask me about reincarnation, first you have to ask, what is a soul? So now we did that. He described what is a soul. So now we can start talking about reincarnation. Before you have to decide, what is a soul? Before you start asking me, does a soul come back? Now we've described that kind of. You go deeper and deeper and deeper. Now he's going to start, what does it mean? Okay, now that you understand that, now you can go to the reincarnation. And therefore, after the death of the body, the soul returns and is reincarnated in the body of another person, and again must try and complete what it failed to correct or what it injured in the past. The sins of man are not eliminated so long as this soul does not complete that which has to complete. From which it may be seen that most souls are not new. They're not in the world for the first time. The vast majority of our souls are made up of different types. We'll even see over here what he goes into even more detail of what they're made up of. Almost every person bears the legacy of previous existences. Generally, one does not obtain the previous self again, for the soul manifests itself in different circumstances and in different situations. What is more, some souls are compounded of more than one single form of person and share parts of a number of persons. A great soul is most usually reincarnated, not in one single body, but branches out, participating in a number of people, each of whom have to satisfy different aspects of existence. In spite of this incalculable complexity, because how do you figure out, it's like the mathematics are mind-boggling. The soul will be made up of the same constituent elements and will have to complete those uncompleted tasks left over from the previous cycle. There are certain like basic things that it's like a line that's going through from one person to another. Therefore, the destiny of a person is connected not only with those things he himself creates or does, but also with what happens to the soul in its previous incarnations. The encounters and events of his life, its joys and sorrows, are influenced by one's previous existence, how it relates to them. One's existence is a continuity, the sustaining of a certain fundamental essence, right? The soul, there's one soul going through a line. And certain elements may rise to the surface which do not seem to belong to the present, which a person has to complete or fix or correct. A portion of the world that it is his task to put right in order for him to raise his soul to its proper level. Now, what does this mean for us? What does that mean, therefore? You tell me. What does that mean for a person? Is this depressing, or is this is this something good? How does this make you feel? That you're not made up of your own self completely. Down, right, Kelly? Right? A little bit like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, it's intense.
Right. Right. But it all has to stem from this fact that there are a certain amount of souls and that they're single elements of that crossbar, and they can go through different bodies and have to be perfected through different bodies.
And I guess it makes me wonder, like, how do you even know, like, what your soul's tikkun is in this world, and like, how do you like make that happen?
So in general, the answer for that is twofold. Number one, that's why you need a Rebbe.
Right.
That's why you need a mashpia. Or if you don't have a Rebbe or a mashpia, somebody who can give you some guidance, it's a person who cares about you and also is able to be, that we have a good friend. I have a good friend. His name is Yoel Spitz, and he's been putting on Facebook different memories he has of Rabbi Steinsaltz, and he writes beautifully, just beautifully. And one of the memories that he just wrote about was this concept of, he came into Rabbi Steinsaltz's office, and I think he saw him on Facebook or something like that. And he asked him, "What are you doing?" Did you find him on Facebook? I can't remember. And Rabbi Steinsaltz says, "I'm just checking this out, but I really don't like it." So he asked him, "Why don't you like it?" He says, "Because you can only like. There's only a button to like. Although they changed that. Then it was only like certain comments. Now you can unlike."
You used to be able to give a thumbs down.
No, I don't think so.
In the beginning you could, and then it was like mean, and they took that out, but then it was just like, and now
Right.
we have more.
He says
Yeah.
that's not real friendship. A real friend is somebody who can tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. Unlike, and tell you straight to your face and explain, and you're still friends. That's a real friend.
Not only that, I have one friend like this. One friend, besides my husband. Sometimes it's better to hear it from a friend. Anyway, but so he benefits when I tell him that. No,
Always.
But this friend, what's great about this one, and I have many friends, but this is a real friend because she can say, "You know what, you're being a bozo right now," and she's like, "Stop fooling yourself." And not only can I hear it, I'm like so happy, right? that she can, and I don't know why. If someone else told me the same thing, I'd probably, I'd probably.
So what I'm
upset.
so,
Yeah.
so let me say, so I said twofold. So it's a friend or a mashpia or a rebbe. That's all comes under the same category. The other thing that the books say is what's difficult for you is usually the thing you have to rectify. Now, that's the point of understanding what your goal is, what you asked. But now when you start asking, but why do I have to rectify this? That's when you can start saying, because it may not even be connected to me. It's something that I have to do in the world. God, it's a mission God gave me at this point. And might not even be my own mission. The whole purpose here is because, so in a certain sense, when I'm trying to
not my mission, it's my soul's mission.
it's not only our soul's, it's God's mission. Right. It's God's mission for the soul.
Right.
So then all of a sudden, you look at yourself of this soul came into my body. Where's the self here? The self is not even the soul. It's not even the body. It's not even the joining of them. It's something even beyond that. I'm saying, and the thing that's sticking behind here is saying, I need to make this work for the sake of the world, for the sake of this soul. That this soul was created, this body was created to do something in the world. It hasn't done it yet. My consciousness, whatever you want to call it, myself, has to take ownership of myself, and I'm capable of doing this, and make sure this soul does it. So the soul is not above, there's something above the soul, there's something above the body, and there's something even between the joining of the soul and the body. It's me, the self. Rabbi Shon's talk, you should read the other chapter. Now I'm starting to understand what he's saying over there, now that I'm articulating this, because he answers these questions. He talks about, so where is the self? Is it the
I have read
soul?
these chapters. We studied this before, if you recall.
Right. We started this way, right. So the self is this consciousness of the caretaker of all these kids. Again, sorry for those who have kids. We got more. Not only do you have to take care of our own kids, we have to take our own inner child. The inner child. We have to take care of it. We have to make sure that it functions and does the right thing. What are the right things? Those are the twofold, what I just said before, the two ways of finding out. Okay? Let's finish this up. It's 9:44.
I want to ask you.
So aren't you talking about self-actualization?
Yes, absolutely. But it's not self-actualization, soul actualization. Because that soul came from somewhere else, maybe, or is made up of all the different things. You're actualizing something. Your mom is doing, you're really doing a chesed, a kindness to this thing that came into your body, or a body. You're doing a kindness. You're helping out because it's your responsibility. You're the caretaker.
And it might be something yourself doesn't really want.
Right. But
We're at the basic level. We're at the primal level, as it were.
yes.
Right? So that's all we can work on. I mean, how many people, who can get to those other levels? But in order to get there, you have to work on this level.
Exactly.
And if you self-actualize, you're also soul-actualized.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly.
So, can I ask a question quickly? So the soul of Mashiach, when we talk about how in every generation there's one person who could merit to be Mashiach, who has the potential to be Mashiach, should we merit it, or should the time be right?
Yes.
Is that almost like in every generation that soul has not yet done what it needs to do, so it keeps coming back waiting to have the opportunity to fulfill its mission?
It's more complicated than that, and it's not that simple.
All right.
The answer is not that simple.
Not that simple.
Right.
Okay.
It's not that simple.
Got it.
Right. Let's go. Let's put this last because he's talking about Mashiach over here.
Oh, all right.
And my wife is mind blowing us. And this struggle of the souls is also the struggle and way of the world towards its redemption. As the souls return and strive to correct the world and vindicate themselves, it's interesting he uses that word, Nathan, and not necessarily actualize themselves, but vindicate themselves. Okay? At a certain level of this overall tikkun or correction, they reach their highest peak. You're right. Their self-vindication, their self-actualization, their ultimate. Then the greatest obstacles are behind the human race, and it can go forward towards perfection with sure steps and without the legacy of suffering inherited from previous existences and previous sins. This is the beginning of salvation, which is the times of Mashiach. I used to have a Rosh Yeshiva named Rabbi Dov Zinger, who used to tell us all the time. He says, when Mashiach comes, that's when the real work is going to start. And he told us, to us guys, he's like, guys, you have to understand, you think you're going to get relief from all your craziness and your struggles as adolescent boys when you get married. Let me tell you something. That's when the real work starts. We were like, I don't care. So, at least I'll get some kind of relief, But so in this manner, man proceeds until that stage is reached when all souls return, each to its own self, correct, Nathan, ultimate self-actualization, when every self in the world will enter into a new life in complete fusion with the higher forces of the soul on all levels and of the body, connects to all the levels. That's why you need all the levels, because that's the time when it perfected itself, manifesting all the potential powers it contains. Then it can really self-actualize. This level of progression of all humanity, in which a new relation will exist between body and soul, and the world will be whole with itself, is called heaven or the next world, which is a disagreement amongst the rabbis. Does that mean that it's in this world with bodies, or it's a completely different place or a completely different thing? Okay, but usually I think the Rambam says it's basically souls once again in bodies in this world. That is true Olam Haba. That is true world to come. It is the goal toward which all the souls of men, in discharging their private and specific tasks in life, aspire and strive. And then what does that mean? Then what happens? Then what's the work with the service? But then you're functioning on the higher levels, and it's it's work without the toil of correction and vindication. So all this time we're trying to reach a certain point where we could really start to work. We're trying to reach marriage, where then after the marriage, that's when the real work starts. Okay, you have to deal with a whole bunch of different distractions. Okay, and just trying to survive type of thing. I remember, well, that story. It's not so much reality today, but around 20 years ago as it was. Rabbi Shanz was trying to describe the difference between America and Israel. And he said to the guys, to all of us who were sitting, he said, you have to understand, Israel, we're still just trying to survive. In America, they live. Now, what they do with their lives, that's a whole different question. But it's a different mentality. And that's what we're trying to say. There's a type of being able to breathe. And now the work starts. Now let's start comprehending God. Now let's start investigating and discussing and exploring, and not just have to worry, is somebody going to attack me from behind type of thing. Or
you can almost say the Jewish people are finally at that place.
Now?
For the most part. I'm not.
I hope that they're getting there.
We hope, where we're fed, there's no pogroms.
We hope.
We hope.
Right.
Okay, I guess we're always going to worry.
Okay. So that was, those were the first 3 chapters, and they were the hardest. I think that from next week, we can go on till Pesach. I hope we do this till Pesach, till Passover. We have around 6 weeks to go. So another 6 sessions we should do this. And we'll cover some more of these chapters, and it gets a little bit more, less technical, let's put it that way, and more comprehensible. With our
Are you saying we should be done by Pesach?
I think we're going to finish this series. Maybe we'll see. I'm aiming towards getting to Pesach, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, maybe we'll learn something else.
Right.
Stick around.
Nice.
Maybe we can take a vote.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good week.
Thank you.